AM. And you go down to the phone. Can you ask for just a quick moment of silence for what's going on here?
But not through the end. It's
Yes.
okay. Sorry about that. Diego, we live? Oh, okay. Thank you, everyone. Sorry about that. I was having some technical difficulties, but apologize and thank you for your patience. So thank you again. This is, I will call this meeting to order at 6:09. And this is the City of Soledad Joint City Council Successor Agency Housing Authority and Successor Housing Agency Special Meeting Agenda, which is our budget workshop, Wednesday, June 11th, 2025. So just again, a couple of comments and thank our community for joining us tonight. This is a budget workshop, so it's important that the community be aware of the city's finances, our expenditures and revenues, as well as our forecasting for future budget surplus or deficits in future years. So this is really important, and as part of the transparency to the community is making sure that they're aware of what our budget looks like. Tonight, the council will not approve the budget, but we'll make different recommendations in terms of what's in our forecast for approval at our next city council meeting. So I just want to thank all of those that are joining us either here, those that are joining us via Zoom, or those that are going to watch this meeting later. This portion is really critical because this is one of the main functions of the city council, is to approve, review, and make sure that the city is in good financial standings to be able to provide the services that we need as a city. So just a couple of reminders. We do have Spanish translations as well for the meetings, as always. And for today, if you want to join us via Zoom, the meeting ID for today is 895-4508-5537. If you don't have access to a computer, you can always join via telephone. The number is 1-669-900-6833, which is the standard number that is used for all of our meetings. The meeting's also streamed on our YouTube channel, but just as a reminder, comments made there will not be recorded as part of the public meeting. So with that, if we can have a roll call, please.
Mayor Ana Velasquez.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Fernando Cabrera.
Here.
Councilmember Anselmo Sanchez.
Here.
Councilmember Rista Pavalos.
Here.
Councilmember Ben Caldera.
Here.
Okay, and I do see there is a panelist with a hand up. I'm not sure. Diego, I don't know if it's a resident, if you're making public comments. Oh, the interpreter, thank you. Okay, the interpreter has her hands raised, so I don't know if she has comments or questions. Okay, so with that, then we'll move on to our Pledge of Allegiance. And if I can have Mayor Pro Tem, if you can lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight, please.
1, 2, and 3. I
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. And at this point, do we have any additions or modifications to the agenda?
We do not.
Okay, so I would like to add, I don't know if it's on the agenda modifications, but I do want to make sure that the council has an opportunity to make some comments in regards to the recent ICE raids in LA and how that's impacting our local community as well. And obviously, we did have some concerns already this week. So I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to be able to comment on that.
So I think Mike Rodriguez is on the Zoom, so if he could maybe weigh in, if our city attorney can weigh in on what we can add to the agenda.
And I see him on here, but Mike, can you unmute?
It says he's talking, but I don't know, we can't hear him.
There we go. I'm sorry, it took me a while to get promoted to panelist. The item is not agendized, but there's always a section at the end of every meeting for council comment and for city council comment, and comments could be raised at that point regarding this issue. But we should refrain from, discussing the problems with the recent immigration enforcement efforts in the city in any kind of detail. But you can make a comment at the end of the meeting at that point.
Okay, thank you, Mike, but I don't see it on there is only the business items, and that's why I wanted to bring it forward, because in the agenda that we have before us, it has no council comments. It just goes into business. We make a recommendation and then it's an adjournment. So can we add the council comments then?
Yeah, you certainly could add the council comment. I mean, that would not be doing anything that was above and beyond what is the norm for every meeting that the council has.
Okay, so then I'll make that recommendation to add the council comments after our business items. So do we need a motion? Do I need a motion for approval, or we can just go?
Yeah, no, you should have a motion to add that, to make sure that I just want to make it clean.
Okay, so council, can I get a motion? I mean, a second?
Second.
Okay, so Councilmember Ansaldo Sanchez, sorry, a second for that motion to be able to add council comments after the business items. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so we will add the council comments after the business items. Thank you. Okay, so at this time, then we will move into public comments. So at this time, any member of the public may address the city council on items not appearing on the agenda, but obviously are under the jurisdiction of the city council. The speakers do have 3 minutes. If you can please be brief to the point. And we ask the public as well as the council to maintain decorum from any derogatory public comments and refrain from making any personal attacks as well. So with that, I want to make sure that we do allow for the public comments portion, and I will take it out first to those that are here in our chambers and then those that are joining us via Zoom. Anyone that's here would like to make a public comment? Okay, seeing none, then I will take it out to those that are joining us via Zoom. If there's any public comments from those joining us via Zoom. Okay, and I see no hands raised, and so I will close the public comment portion of today's meeting. And then we will go into, did we get any written public comments? Okay, so we have no written public comments. And so before we go into the business items, I do want to make a personal apology. And I want to say at this time to Mayor Pro Tem Cabrera for last week's meeting, where it seemed that I was questioning why he needed to leave the meeting before it ended. So I just want to make sure that that I personally say and publicly that was not my intention. I wasn't aware of some of the concerns that he had prior to the start of the meeting. So I just want to reiterate, I know upon consulting with our city attorney, if a council member needs to leave the meeting, they can do so. Obviously, that's part of what we can do without having to make a personal statement in terms of why you're leaving the meeting. I think it's enough to say that you need to leave. And so I just wanted to clarify that for everyone. And again, my apologies if it seemed disrespectful. I know it was a really heavy meeting last week, but I just want to make sure it's clear that was not my intention.
Thank you.
So with that, I will move on to our business item for today. And so today we will receive a presentation on the City of Soledad's 2025-26 budget. We do have the staff report and also the exhibit and the budget binders for our 2025-26 budget and capital improvement programs. So I will turn this over to our city manager.
Thank you. Honorable Mayor and council members, on behalf of our Soledad team, I'm privileged to present you and the community our recommended operating and capital program budget for fiscal year 25-26. I did want to really acknowledge the directors in working with Mike and Jesus Yanez and myself in looking at ways to keep the budget, with not only no increases, the status quo budget, but actually we did make some additional cuts. I think folks were very frugal, and it's not always an easy thing to do. So I did want to thank our executive team for working with us. And then I did want to acknowledge a couple of folks in the budgeting process. In addition to our directors, I wanted to acknowledge Jesus Yanez, who helped put together some of the salary schedules. And I especially wanted to acknowledge Sochi, Palayo, and Fran, who came in to help Mike. And above all is our excellent finance director, who really led the ship in bringing this into a balanced budget. So I do want to thank, it was a real team effort. And also, of course, as usual, Darlene and Diego for doing a great job on coordinating the meetings each week. I did want to note that I do intend to finalize the strategic plan in concert with you and bring it back for hopefully council adoption. It's projected to come back in August, but as part of the budget, we did take 114 pages of content. I mean, great content that you all helped produce along with the executive team. And in my budget message, which I won't go into detail too much about, we pulled together a list of what we heard from everyone, which was kind of the top priorities for this year. Some of these things are already in the process. And so when we came up with the budget, even though it's a very thin budget, we did contemplate some of these priorities that you provided to us during the 2 days of workshops that you were involved in. If you don't mind moving the slide forward to the next slide. So in the budget presentation, our overall operating budget is about 60.5 million, a little hair over that. As I mentioned before, we really did look at the strategic goals, but we also looked at the budget survey responses from last year. And we also have had a number, as many of you know, because you participated in many of the workshops, we've been able to get feedback even subsequent to that, whether it be the state of the city address or, the general plan workshop that really reiterated those budget priorities from the community. So a lot, continues to happen in Soledad. We're doing a lot, even with this slimmed down budget. Next slide. So, I think we all know that economic uncertainty persists. There's been a flattening of sales tax. I think, the question of tariffs has also put a little chilling effect on people's spending. There has been a modest increase in property tax, which is positive, and some of that has been a result of brand new development. The budget, we continue to face costs increases, and they're increasing faster than revenue in the long term. cost for staffing continue to go up. And of course, as we know, if you buy eggs at the grocery store, there's a lot of costs that we're all experiencing. And that's true when we're doing construction projects as well. The cost of steel and other things have gone up, so that's affecting us as well. We have a lot of significant capital needs for our general fund facilities, a lot of deferred maintenance over the years. We are, incrementally trying to get and address some of those things, but it's going to take some time. And we're going to need to look at grant funding, to help augment those costs. And then probably the biggest thing that we've all been knowing about is the CAL FIRE contract, which we are having to move to increase staffing. These are consistent with the National Fire Protection standards. Right now we have 2 people on an engine, but we are going to have to move to 3 people on an engine, regardless of having a ladder truck or not. It's really about safety and providing that service, but that is an increased cost that we're having to bear this year. And we have a solution that we'll talk a little bit more about as a potential valuation of a parcel tax. Next slide. So I think a lot of positivity in terms of economic development. Just want to shout out to both Public Works and of course community development staff that have helped process these applications. But as we know, we have an Ace Hardware store, we have Dutch Brothers, Panda, the DaVita Dialysis Center is going to be opening soon. Tractor Supply is under construction. Some of you might have attended the Real Rock Brew Pub groundbreaking. We have a Holiday Inn that has an approved entitlement, and we're hoping that they submit building plan soon. We also have a Quick Quack that is car wash that's in the entitlement process. And as you may remember, we're looking at a potential truck stop, and you approved a contract to start the environmental process. Next slide. There are a lot of future budget risks that Mike is going to talk too much, or not too much. There's never enough, we have to talk a lot about these things, but I do want to make it clear that one of the scariest things is the expiration of Measure Y in 2032. And he has a really good slide to show what the consequence could be. So we're going to have to look at ways to extend that tax. We're seeing decreasing revenues in our VLF, our vehicle license fee, and our gas tax. Some of that is also as a result of declining populations in the prison, which is generally a good thing. And we're also seeing a lot more electric vehicles. So that also affects our gas tax revenues. I already mentioned CAL FIRE and the escalating construction costs. The opportunities we have is we still have some potential build out in the Soledad marketplace, and of course downtown, including hopefully we can get Container Village kicked off. We are looking at a lot of potential affordable housing development, and we have some vacant industrial land that has potential development upside. One of that is, we mentioned looking at a potential truck stop. And then we do have the development of Miramonte, which is a 30-year phase development that has the potential to add almost 2,400 homes. But there's also neighborhood service retail, commercial projects, and also not on the slide, but just to mention, we have that parcel up on the north end, the Brinton property that, we have hoped we annexed into the city to see some type of large commercial development in the future. Next slide. So building for the future, obviously, it's important to build up our general capital improvement fund. The current balance is projected to be 7.3 million at the end of 25-26. These are to supporting projects not eligible otherwise for other grants or impact fees. We have our 5-year capital improvement program to ensure that the city is able to match our expenditures with funding sources. We do need to update our impact fees because they're not keeping up with costs of necessary improvements, and we need a cost allocation plan for that. And then I think we've mentioned this, we are intending to launch the water and sewer rate study this year. We've worked on doing a sewer or wastewater or water reclamation facility assessment, and we have a water assessment that will help with that rate study that are nearly to completion, and we'll come back to you for a discussion about what is in those assessments. And then we do need to do a TOT audit to make sure that the hotel operators understand what the requirements are and to make sure that the collections are accurate. And then I already mentioned our strategic plan that's coming up. Next slide. This is a very small organizational chart for you all to see. But we can, if you really need a better than the what we have on in your binders, let us know and we can blow it up to a bigger size. But this is essentially the staffing that's reflected in the budget. The next slide. And then with that, I want to turn it over to our Cracker Jack Director of Finance to kind of go into the detail.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Before we dive into the rest of the presentation, I just want to do a couple of housekeeping items. On the dais are a couple of sheets, and we apologize. Inadvertently, in the production of the binders, there were a few of the narratives that got left out. So we've provided those for you to slip into those sections of the binder. And we noted that we needed to make one change to one of the slides in the presentation. It's already been adjusted for tonight, but we wanted you to have it in your binder as well. So also I want to just kind of talk about your binders because we have 2 council members who have not been through this process yet, and just wanted to kind of walk through the structure of the way your binder is. So the very front, of course, is the city manager's budget message. The presentation, tonight's presentation is behind that. Then there's a budget summary tab where we summarize in your binder. It actually has the staff report for next week's meeting with the exhibits. There are some summaries that are involved in there. A fund balance summary, which is a very important page. That's one of the pages that we do after we've nailed down all of the numbers. We put together this summary of all of the fund balances. And this is where we reconcile transfers between funds and make sure that they all balance. And we project what our fund balances are going to be. Because if we built a budget and we're going to have projected negative fund balances, we need to go back and review the budgets before we present them. There are also some other charts that are also in the presentation. The meat of the binder is broken up into sections. The first section is the general fund, and there's tabs for the various departments. The next section is our enterprise funds. Enterprise funds are those business entities. They operate like a business. We'll talk a little bit more about those. Then we have our special revenue funds, and we'll talk about those in the presentation. I'm sorry. Yeah, they operate the enterprise, and then we have all of our special revenue funds. And then the final tab is our CIP plan, which is has been a great tool in projecting what future expenditures are going to be for capital. So that's kind of the structure of your binders. So Megan stole a little bit of my thunder, but I'm going to jump right in here. And This binder, although it, it might be a little bit heavy, it looks a little full. But I was doing kind of this calculation and estimating some staff time. I knew what my time was. I was pretty sure I knew what Megan's time was and other staff members who participated. The work put into doing this budget, and I only say this because I want you to know that staff takes this serious, is the collective work of over 200 hours to put this binder together. So a lot of work went into doing this, and staff takes it very serious. So when we prepare the budget, we have some guiding document. We don't just start and say, oh, let's just throw darts at the wall and figure out what we're going to do. We have a lot of documents that we use. We use the 2024 community survey. So we looked at that feedback and what was important to our community, what we accomplished in the current fiscal year, and what we can continue to accomplish in the 25-26 year. We looked at the strategic goals as the pillars that Megan talked about and how we can incorporate those, even though the document isn't complete. We still wanted to incorporate some of those things. And those items are mentioned in the city manager's budget message. We have the 5-year capital improvement plan. We are in the 5th year of our water and sewer rate plan. So we use that as a guiding tool to look at. That's why we're going to be doing a new study. We use institutional knowledge, the staff input with our historical data, and we also get estimates from the county, TAMSI, and the state in what they estimate some of our revenues. Okay. So just a reminder of what the 2024 budget survey results were. There were 4 categories in housing, public safety, retail opportunities, and streets. And I'm not going to go into detail what all of those were, but those were some of the priorities that the community said were important to them. So we've made sure that we've tried to continue to implement or find ways to budget resources to address some of these needs. We can't address all of them in 1 year, but we want to continue to address them. Next slide. For the strategic goals, the pillars that we looked at was economic development, housing, mobility and infrastructure, safety and emergency preparedness, youth education, health, and governance. Those were the items that were brought out in all of the work that we've done on those Saturdays that you all work together by yourselves, we work together collaboratively, and it's like Megan mentioned, it's almost done. So this budget, this is not inclusive of all the capital projects that are in the budget, but these are some of the large capital projects or some of the ones that we wanted to highlight. We have very little money that we've budgeted in the general fund for some capital projects. We're trying to chalk away at some. So we have budgeted for City Hall and Police Department roof repairs. We do need to address those or we're going to have a bigger problem because we do have leaks in both buildings. We have project at the reclaimed water, the reclaimed water project, that's the purple pipe. So that project will be going forward. A water meter replacement project that is partially, hopefully grant funded. Well rehabilitation and upgrades. The water tank rehabilitation. We will be doing more slurry seal projects this year. Pedestrian safety enhancements, manhole replacements, and the West Street project, which is already underway. So for staffing, as Megan mentioned, this is a status quo budget. We have some declining revenues, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, but there are no new positions. But in order to maximize the efficiencies of City Hall, we do have 3 reclassifications that are incorporated into the budget. 2 of the reclassifications are in the Community and Economic Development Department, and that is the reclassification of the Community Development Administrative Assistant to a Development Permit Technician, and the Building Permit Technician to the same position, Development Permit Technician. In the police department, we do have we just highlighted this one. This is a reclassification that the council has already approved. They approved it in this current fiscal year, but it carries over into the next budget. And that was a sergeant was reclassified to a lieutenant. In addition, we have one in public works. And there's no FTE increase, but it's the reclassification of the assistant engineer to a project/construction manager position. Okay. We've got kind of a placeholder there. We'll get further details, but we need to do something there to try and looking toward the future and maybe bringing in-house some of our contract management and those types of things. Okay. So high level general fund. This is kind of how the general fund shapes up. This is the most important fund to us at the city. So 71% of our budget is dedicated to personnel. This is salaries and benefits. Now, in full disclosure, I have taken in the budget, the fire contract is in supplies and services, but that fire contract is a contract for personnel. So I have taken it out of the supplies and services and added it with salaries and benefits. So we had an actual reflection of what our costs are for manpower. Then we have the supplies and services, other charges, and you can see we only spend 2% on capital projects for all of these general fund assets, which at some point we need to get to a point where we're spending more than that to maintain the assets that we have. Those assets include City Hall, the Courtyard, the Police Department, the Gateway Center. They include the Community Center. They include all the parks, all the city parks, the parks that are not in the assessment districts. That's what that sliver is taking care of. Okay. Our ongoing challenges, we've already mentioned this, our normal revenues, the increases are not keeping pace with expenditures. And some of those day-to-day expenditures, salaries and PERS. PERS has been an issue. We did get a reprieve for 2 years where we did not have an increase in our unfunded liability because the interest earnings were greater than the 7% guaranteed that what PERS pool is. So if you don't, well, to or new, the way PERS works is PERS has a policy that says that they have to generate a guaranteed rate of return of 7%. When the economy is poor and they only earn 4%, they then make up that 3% by allocating an unfunded liability to all jurisdictions in the state of California. And we make up the extra 3% so that they get their guaranteed 7%. Unfortunately, the reverse is not true. Last year, they earned about 10%. We didn't get a rebate, but we didn't get an increase. They get to keep the pool. Our infrastructure is aging. We won't continue to beat on that. And then because of these expenses, it's limiting our ability to do capital projects for general fund assets. And then when is Measure Y going to sunset? $2032. That's not that far away. Council, we need to be looking at that. We can't wait till the last minute. We need to get it we need to do this several years before the expiration. So in some off chance it doesn't pass to extend, we have a shot at coming back to the public. If we wait until 2031 and it doesn't pass, we're soon going to see what the effect of that's going to be, because I'm going to show you a slide. Yeah.
As we are looking at a parcel tax, we got to separate that, because if they see a parcel tax on a ballot and they see an extension for this, especially kind of back to back.
There would be some separation in them. You're absolutely right. The difference usually is with an extension, we're already paying it. It's just extending what we already are paying. It's not a new tax on the public. And there will be a very large campaign on that front to educate the public that actually for the sales tax, a very large, we can't quantify it, but we know that it's significant, is not paid by residents. It's the highway travelers who are coming off the highway and bringing their dollars into Soledad. So, but you're right, we do need to educate.
Yeah, so I think as we're going along then, council, if there's any questions, do you want to pause now before the end of the presentation? I'm writing down mine, but I want to make sure that if everybody feels comfortable, whether you guys want to wait or ask questions during the presentation.
I will leave it up to you. Generally, what I have found is sometimes when some of the questions you might have, they might get answered later in the presentation.
Yeah.
So if,
Okay. So yeah.
but I'll leave it up to.
We'll do that so that way we can get through the full presentation and then come back. But I would urge you, if you have questions as we're going through, please make sure you're documenting them so they don't get lost.
It's only an hour and a half. No, just kidding.
Thanks, Mike, for the warning.
Okay. So more about our general fund. In June of 2022, the council amended our our reserve policy to increase the council reserve from $1.5 million to $2 million as the city was getting in a better financial position. We also established the general fund capital projects fund, where we started transferring money over into a capital projects fund so that we would have resources in the future. You know, for example, if, you know, money gets made available, CDBG grants, and there's grant funds out there, but they require matching funds to, let's just say, rebuild a city hall complex. We would be prepared to handle that and not have to go out and get financing. Okay. And that's already been mentioned that at the end of the 25-26, we project that balance to be about $7.3 million. Okay. So tonight, the general fund is presented to you as balanced, but using $510,000 of the current operating reserve. I will tell you that Megan and I went through this over and over and over again, and we probably could have taken another $500,000 out of the budget. But that the bottom line is that would have been an unrealistic budget for the departments to live with. I mean, we've already pared them down to the bare bones. And so we thought it was prudent. We do have some significant reserves, operating reserves right now that we can use. So we should use those this 1 year while we entertain this additional revenue source, the parcel tax that we're just talking about. And then our projection is that we wouldn't have to dip into any more operating reserves going forward, except for, you know, possibly some one-time capital projects. So if everything closes on plan for 25-20 or 24-25 and as planned for 25-26, and after the $2 million operating reserve, our operating fund balance is projected to be at $3.6 million. Okay. That's in addition to the $7 million capital reserve. Here's just an illustration. I'm a firm believer that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and we can talk about the importance of them, but when you see it graphically, you can see exactly where the chunks of our money is coming from. That 36% represents property taxes. And then you'll see the 8%, 16%, 18, or 8%. That's all of our sales tax. So we've got 32% of our revenue comes from sales tax. The first 8% is our Bradley Burns. Those are the transactions that are happening inside the city of Soledad. The 16% is Measure Y. I want you to take note of how big that piece of the pie is. And then the other 8% is Measure S, which is 0.5%. So that 1% Measure Y represents today 16% of our budget. So the bulk of our budget is coming from property taxes and sales tax. I just want to caution at this point, this is a double-edged sword. When the economy is great, we benefit greatly. When the economy is stressed, we have exposure here. If property tax, we saw it in the Great Recession. Property tax declined and people stopped spending. That's over 70% of our budget revenues start declining. So we do have some exposure there, but when it's good, right? So, and then the rest is just fee for services and other miscellaneous revenues, but the bulk comes in sales tax and property tax. Okay, next slide. This is how we spend our money. So, you know, basically we're earning 15 million, we're spending 16 million or 15 million. The bulk of that is in the police department. That's your green slice. That's typical for all jurisdictions. Your public safety is going to be your largest expense in the general fund. And then the fire department represents 12%. So that's 52% of our general fund spending is in those two budgets. Okay. And then all of the other slices make up the various departments inside of the general fund. Okay. Measure Y. So Measure Y was put into place in 2012. It's hard to believe it was that long ago. It feels like it was yesterday. It is set to sunset in 2032. The proceeds from Measure Y are essential to our city. They represent 16% of our revenues. And so consistent with the ordinance that when this was adopted, there is a citizens oversight committee, and council recently adopted or decided to change the oversight committees of Measure Y and S and combine them to a 7-member City of Soledad Transaction and Use Tax Oversight Committee. I say on here staff's projection. This is actually really our consultant HDL that gives us these projections on what the economy is doing. We're projecting roughly $2.4 million of revenue to come in for Measure Y. So 16% equals $2.4 million. I want you to remember these numbers, okay? This is how we have budgeted the Measure Y. I guess in full disclosure, I want to note at the beginning of this, Measure Y is now completely funded by actions that were taken by the previous councils, by city councils. There is no longer any discretionary spending in Measure Y. It is 100% allocated on previous actions. And we're going to see that almost all of it is on salaries. So 1.3 million is going to the police department, its existing positions, some overtime, the purchases of equipment, some small purchase of equipment, and then the police department vehicles, the leases for the police department are paid for out of Measure Y. The fire department, when Measure Y was originally formed, we had a baseline of the contract for the CAL FIRE services, and then all future increases would be funded by Measure Y. So over this 20+ years, those contract increases have all hit Measure Y, and we're at the point now where that's 1.2 or just over $1 million. It's coming from Measure Y. And then we have an administrative cost. We have to pay the CDTFA, the state of California, 1% of all transaction tax that's collected. So we pay them 1% for collecting this transaction use tax for us and remitting it to us. So nothing spectacular about this graph. It basically just shows that everything is going to public safety. Okay. Measure S. Measure S was passed right at the beginning of COVID. I think we were lucky. And so that was passed in November of 2020 and took effect in April of 2021. The centerpiece of that was that it was the creation of our own Parks and Recreation Department. Prior to that, we did not have our own. Probably everybody here has been in the community long enough to know that we used to pay the YMCA to run programs in our building. So, and we didn't get any of the revenue. They got to keep all the revenue, but we paid them to operate a recreation program inside the city of Soledad. So with the passage of Measure S, the commitment was we would cancel that contract and we would have our own Park and Recs department and take over the community center as our own. So, and that's been a great asset to us to take over. The important cost of the important thing at the bottom here is this is a calculation I do every year because one of the concerns by the residents back in 2020 when we were passing this was, well, we're going to pass this. You know, the city was already funding a certain amount of money for recreation. And they're like, oh, we're just going to pay this tax and you're going to take that money and put it somewhere else. So we do this calculation every year to show that the general fund is still funding recreation. And in this budget, the general fund is funding recreation at the tune of $820,000. So that calculation is, we take our Measure S money, we take our park and our recreation revenues, we then subtract all of our expenses for the community center and the other Measure S funds, and we are continuing to subsidize recreation. And in this budget, it's $820,000. Okay. This is the breakout of how that goes. So you can see 45% of that goes to recreation, community engagement. There's a small sliver for animals. And again, there's that administrative fee that we have to pay the state of California to collect the tax for us. Okay. So that's the general fund. The next important funds are our enterprise funds. These are business unit funds. They are funds that, if we so choose, we could choose to move general fund dollars into them, but generally we do not. They are standalone business units, and the expenses and the maintenance of those assets are paid by ratepayers. So that we don't depend on property tax or sales tax to fund these utility accounts. These funds operate exactly like your PG&E bill or any other utility, your cable, those types of things. So we have 4 enterprise funds. It's water, the wastewater, commonly referred to as the sewer, solid waste or the garbage, and the sanitation fund. So whatever the ratepayer pays, it goes into that fund and can only be used for the assets or the operations and the maintenance of the assets for those business units. We can't collect water money and pay for sewer infrastructure. We can't collect sewer fees and pay for the police department. They stay within those business units. Okay. This year we will perform the 2025-26 rate study. We are in the 5th year of the study that was done. So this is our last year of the rates adopted by council. So one more thing to look forward to in this coming year, council, is a new rate study and approving a new 5 years worth of rates for our enterprise funds. And so we're gonna launch that this summer. We'll send out an RFP and we'll start that so that we have everything in place and we have plenty of time to bring it to council and have it be effective on July 1st of 2026. The water fund revenues for this year are projected to be right at about $5 million. And we have expenditures of $5.2 million. And of those expenses, 1.6 of those expenses is for capital projects. Those are some of the highlighted ones that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, the well maintenance and the upgrades to our wells. I think we've all known that we've had some of our wells go down and those types of things, and how important and critical it is for us to maintain the wells. And so we need to make sure we're spending money there. The water fund still does have one outstanding debt instrument. It will mature in 33, 34, and we owe $756,000 left. When I look at that, we hardly owe anything. This is a very healthy fund, and we're going to show it graphically here in a minute. Okay. I mean, it's healthy in operate. Let me just make a clarification. It's healthy in operations. However, we have problems because we don't have reserves in this fund. So I'm just going to give fair warning. There will be some rate increases in the water. But when we look at how it's proportioned, we can see that basically 30% is for salaries and benefits, 30% for supplies. Then there's other charges and the capital projects, and then that little sliver, that purple one, for debt service. See, we always want to see that debt service slice be the small piece of the pie. What's impressive here is that we are spending about as much on capital as we are for our supplies and services and our salaries and benefits, which is a really good mix. And it shows that we're maintaining, that we have the resources to maintain our assets. Okay. Onto the wastewater. So the wastewater, we are projecting the revenues to be at about $8.3 million with expected expenditures of $11 million. And right now you might be thinking, Mike, you're crazy. You said you were presenting a balanced budget. How are you spending? This fund has built up reserves over the years, and Public Works has been doing a good job throughout the year in letting you know we have a very, very expensive plant that is at the point where it's going to need some pretty significant maintenance. And so we need to start investing money into that plant and using those reserves to make sure that that plant, you know, it's like maintaining your car. It's like changing the oil and maintaining your tires and rotating your tires. We need to make sure that we're maintaining this asset. It is the single largest asset that the city of Soledad owns. So the budget includes $2.7 million of capital. And this one is always the kicker for this fund. We have a $1.5 million debt service payment that comes every single December to the State Water Board. And that does not retire until the year 2039-40. We still owe $23 million on that debt. And then this is the fund that I absolutely have to calculate every single year. We have a debt service coverage ratio that is an obligation of our loan that we have to maintain a target of 1.2. Our debt ratio is 1.2, and that is operating revenues over operating expenses. The current budget shows us at 1.3. So we're in a good position right now, and that's what we want to maintain. So it really is a balance. You know, we could go, our debt service ratio could actually plummet if all of a sudden we said we were going to do $5 million of capital spending and not spend as much in operations. That would drive that percentage way down because you don't consider capital in the ratio. It's operating revenue, operating expenses. Okay. So here's how this one's not as nice as the water pie. Because now you see that purple slice is much larger because this fund carries a pretty hefty debt. Now, that's not anything for us to really be concerned about. Every jurisdiction that has a plant like this has a debt service obligation in their sewer fund similar to this. And we have a couple of South County cities, actually more than a couple, that are currently out of compliance with their current systems, and they don't have the funding to build the plant like we do. But I can tell you that one city, that their projection for their plant is over $100 million. Yeah. So they're going to carry, once those plants get built, they're going to have pretty significant debt. And if you have to maintain that 1.2%, their sewer rates are going to be really high just to maintain the debt service ratio. So, so right now we're in a good position, and we do have a healthy fund balance. So we're able to cover the expenses, the deficit spend, if you will, in this fund. Okay, next fund. The next is the garbage waste. We're just basically the middleman for Tri-Cities. They do the hauling, they do what we do is we do the billing for them, and we get a franchise fee for doing that. So our revenues are expected to be at $3.6 million with about 3.6 million in spending. This fund is expected to be flush because the residual gets transferred to the general fund as a franchise fee. So, and nothing special about this. The supplies and services for the expenditures, that is almost entirely made up of the two contracts for Salinas Valley Solid Waste and Tri-Cities. So that makes up almost the bulk of that 73%. Okay. The next is our sanitation. This fund has been around since 1993. We charge $6 per month. You see, it doesn't bring in a whole lot of revenue. It brings in about just real close to $360,000. We spend the full $360 every year. And the purpose of this fund, this $6 a month fee, is for graffiti removal, animal control, litter maintenance, and sanitation services. And again, it's made up of salaries for the staff to perform some of those things, and then the supplies and services is the bulk of it. So, okay. The next is our special revenue funds. So we have different categories of special revenues. If you look in your budget binder, you'll see that we have streets and transportation, community development, public safety, the assessment districts, and the impact fees. Within the streets and maintenance, there are 3 different funds. We have our gas tax fund, we have our SB1 road and maintenance fund that comes from the state, and we have Measure X, which is the TAMSI sales tax measure. Megan mentioned that, as the economy gets a little bit tighter, and one of the drivers in our sales tax, our declining sales tax, is actually declining fuel sales. And we can make some educated guesses on what we think that is. And what we believe it is it's a combination of 2 factors. One, we have still very high gas prices, so people are starting to drive less. We've seen this before. We've watched this wave. If you go back a few years, we had very high gas prices, and everybody started dumping all of their large vehicles and buying the more economical vehicles. And you couldn't, the lots were filled with trucks and SUVs. And interest rates were high. Then interest rates got low, gas prices went down, and all of a sudden SUVs and trucks picked up. The sales picked up. Now we're seeing that decline again, where people are like, I can't fill up my gas tank with $150 or $200 to fill up this thing that's going down the road. The other factor is EV vehicles. The state has still not resolved how it is going to handle the loss of revenue. This is a very large topic in Sacramento. Every electric vehicle that gets sold reduces gas tax that goes to the state of California, which then gets remitted down to the cities and the counties, because now they're not paying anything to maintain the roads. So Sacramento has been wrestling for a number of years. There's many proposals that they've been exploring. And one of them is a fee that they would pay at registration, or like today, one of the proposals that I read about was when you register your vehicle, you would have to take it to a shop, like you get a smog certificate. They would scan your odometer reading, and that shop would send it into the state. And so they would have what it was the previous year, what it was this year, and they would send you a bill of the cents per mile that you drove. There's flaws with that because some of us drive out of state. So why would we pay for miles driven if I went across country for a vacation? We're only supposed to be paying for it for what we drive in California, but we're going to let Sacramento deal with that. But in the meantime, it's affecting us. Less gas tax money means we have less money to maintain our streets. Let's go back with SB 1 was passed a few years back. This is an additional gas tax that you pay every time you pump gas, and we get money, and it's specifically for maintenance. It's street maintenance. So we have 2 buckets of money, and then we have Measure X, which is the sales tax measure that was passed by TMZ county-wide. All the cities supported it, and as a result of supporting their tax measure, each of the cities that TMZ agreed to give an allocation to each of the cities. This is a very important measure for us. Just to let you know how important it was, the Front Street renovations were all paid by Measure X. Okay. Community development funds, special revenue funds, those include program income for home and business loans, any other CDBG grants. REAP and LEAP are just an example of some of those grants that were there. These are specific earmarked funds that we receive that can only be used for a specific purpose. Just like the gas tax, we can't take gas tax money and pay for police and fire services. It can only be used for streets and roads. And believe me, we get audited, and they are very tough audits. I do not like going through a gas tax audit. Those auditors are tough. But we keep all our records so that we can go through them. Okay, next one. Then we have some special revenue funds related to public safety for police and fire. The traffic safety fund is our Proposition 172. This is a half of a percent of our sales tax money that comes through the county and gets remitted to us. Those funds can only be used for public safety items. And so they're kept into a separate fund, and they can only be used for public safety. Then we have our asset forfeiture fund, our vehicle abatement. We have a fire training plan or fund, which that fund is now going to zero. And then we have the EMS 64 fund, where we get a small amount every year for that. And the fire department uses that for the purchasing of equipment, hoses, one-time purchases, because that money can decline as well. But so we use that for capital. We don't use that money for salaries. Okay. Next slide. Then we have our assessment districts. Those are also in the category of a special revenue, because all of the revenues collected by each assessment can only be used in that assessment district and what it was specifically for. So we have an assessment to take care of parks and landscaping. We have an assessment for taking care of the streets and lighting. Included in here, there are 2 debt service funds, one for the vineyards and one for Diamond Ridge. And that was for infrastructure at the beginning of those developments. And so once those bonds are paid off, then those 2 assessment districts go away. Okay. And then the rates are set by council. You already have seen the item to the intent to levy, and in July, we will actually adopt what the rates are. The rates are prepared by an outside engineering fund, and because we're required to get the engineer's report every year on what the rates should be. Okay. Then we have our impact fee funds. Our impact fees funds give us an indication of how development is doing inside the city, because these fees are paid at the time that we final projects. Okay. So they give us insight of whether we're growing, whether we're not growing, and the use of these funds are only for growth if we wanted to put in a new road, or we wanted to put in a roundabout that was something new that increases the capacity than what we currently have. The most basic thing is let's say we have roof repairs for the city hall, right? I mentioned that as one of the capital projects. Well, we have a general government impact fee fund, and some might say, well, let's just pull it out of there to do those roof repairs. That's an ineligible expense. You can't use impact fees for the maintenance of assets. You can only use impact fees for the increase of assets. Because what the intent of those are is the developers pay those for the increase demand that's going to be on the city for those developments. So an increase in fire services, an increase in police services, those types of things. And we see that in the Miramonte agreement, where the developer knows they've got to pay for things for fire, things for police, because we're going to have to increase staffing, increase patrol vehicles, those types of things in order to handle that new development. So they really do give us a picture of what the growth of the city looks like. And they're all pretty much capital projects. Impact fees are spent on capital projects that increase the capacity of the city. So the only project that we have budgeted this year in impact fees is parks. We have a couple of projects to use park impact fees. Okay. The last fund grouping of funds is our successor agency. In 2011, Governor Brown dissolved the redevelopment agencies across the state of California. In February of 2012, that officially began. The city, 4 years ago, I think it is now, filed our last and final ROPS. So we basically are on autopilot. We just have a debt service. We have bonds against the redevelopment agent or the former redevelopment agency. Once those bonds are paid off, the successor agency then goes away. It ceases to exist. It's not our money. The funds that come into the successor agency are from the former boundaries of the redevelopment agency, which is all of the retail and a little bit on Front Street. So all of the shopping center, the industrial, all those property taxes go to the successor agency. We pay the bonds, and then the excess, the county distributes to all the taxing entities in the county. So, for example, the schools get like 40%, and our share is I think we have the lowest in the South County. I think our share is 13%. So it's called a private purpose trust, meaning that we are just trustees of those funds. The funds belong to the state of California, basically when they took them over. So it's just on autopilot until the bonds are paid off, and then we're done. Okay, next slide.
On this, when are the bonds going to be paid off on this?
See?
Oh, the next slide.
It's answered in the next slide. So there are two bonds. We refinance them. Mayor, you may have been the only one that was on council back in 2016, or were you on council back? Anyway, when we refinanced them in 2016, we hit the market really well, and I was able to jump in and refinance our existing bonds, which saved the city $4 million of interest at that time. So we have two bonds, the 2016 A and B. The A tax allocation refunding bond will be paid off in 28-29. So we're just right around the corner. We only owe $1.5 million on that. The B portion of that will be paid off in 32-33, and we owe $6.3 million on that bond. So one of them is going to pay off here pretty quick. That will mean additional excess revenue. I did do a calculation because I thought somebody might ask me the question of when that pays off, what does that mean to the general fund? it actually will mean about $100,000 to the general fund once that bond is paid off, our share of what the excess will be in that year. So, because that excess comes to the general fund. Okay, next slide. Nothing impressive about this slide. It's all debt service. And the state allows us to get, the state allows us to keep a mere $16,000 for paying those bonds and administering the successor agency. Okay, so future items, we talked about some of these in Megan's opening comments. PERS cost will continue to increase. We will not always have a year where the PERS gets a guaranteed rate of 7%. And they will just naturally increase because of salaries are increasing, which means they have a higher demand for folks when they hit retirement age. So PERS are going to go up with inflation no matter what. The single largest threat to the city of Soledad and this financial budget is the expiration of Measure Y. I cannot overemphasize that. It is the single largest threat to the financial future of the city. And it sounds like it's a long ways away, but a council today needs to make sure that a council in 2033 doesn't have to deal with that deficit. In my mind, that's the fiduciary responsibility. And then we've already talked about CAL FIRE. We don't want to beat up Jason, but we do have to deal with the increased cost to our fire department. And I will say, we get great service from CAL FIRE, and it is still, we did an analysis a year ago. It is still cost effective for us to contract with CAL FIRE. We don't have the PERS unfunded liability. We don't have the training costs. We don't have the vacancy. We don't have the overtime. Yeah, we don't have to deal with all of that. They take all of that burden. And those are significant when we're trying to recruit for positions and being competitive and those types of things. Okay, next slide. All right, here it is. You could see where, so the kind of orangish line, those are our expenditures. This is just the general fund forecasts and our revenues. And so you can see where in 25-26, we're deficit spending and we're using about $500,000 of our operating reserve. And then it jumps up. That's just an expectation that the parcel tax will pass that we're looking at and hopefully be placing on the ballot. But our costs, we're still going to be really close to where our revenues and expenditures are right, almost in line. Hopefully that line is going to touch, right? But if we get to 31, 32, and we do nothing, that revenue line dramatically drops. And the delta between those two lines is a budget deficit that will require layoffs. There will be no other way to take care of that deficit because Measure Y is paying for a lot of significant staffing. And all of it's in public safety. That doesn't mean that all the reductions would be in public safety. We would have to face that bridge if we ever got to it. But our expenses won't go down. We will just have a dramatic reduction of $2.5 million of revenue to cover expenses. So if you take away anything, we have a balanced budget and we're in good financial position, but we have a future cliff that we're about ready to jump off of if we don't we can avoid it. And we need to make sure that we strategically plan and get it on the ballot at the right time. So enough on Measure Y. I won't beat you up over Measure Y anymore. Okay, next. Okay. So hopefully we've answered a lot of your questions. We wanted to keep everything kind of at a high level and all the work that we've done. But those are the actions that we're going to be asking for you to take next Wednesday on the 18th, where we will actually bring forward the budget document for the adoption of the city council. So we'll be asking you to accept and approve the 2025-26 fiscal year budget. You'll authorize the city manager and the finance director to realign the budget for 2024 with actuals. And you would approve a transfer from the 2024-25 budget of $132,715 from the general fund to the successor housing fund. What those funds are is the proceeds from the sale of the parcels to the school district. So, originally when we looked into that project, we were going to be able to have some of those units for our employees and those types of things. We only think it's fair that we take the proceeds from those, move. Oops. And move those expenses into the successor housing. I will just make sure in full transparency that if the council agrees with staff's recommendation and moves those funds to a special revenue fund, they cannot come back out. Once they're committed as special revenue, they stay as special revenue. So they will be committed to low-income housing. So we're recommending that you do that so that we can further some of the projects that Megan has talked about and some of the things that the actions that this council has taken in this year, where, for example, the purchase of 540 Gavilan for the development of low-income housing. These funds would be helpful in furthering that project. You would approve the position allocation, that is our staffing. And then we would ask you to adopt or approve the compensation, the planning for everybody. That's a requirement of PERS. Every year we need to have the council approve the salary plan. PERS requires that we have an approved, adopted salary plan by the city council. We will ask you to reaffirm the emergency contingency reserve policy, and then we will ask you to approve the establishing of the proposition for general fund appropriations limit for the fiscal year. That's commonly referred to as the GAN limit. There's a special calculation. There's an exhibit in your staff report. We'll go over that at the next Wednesday's meeting, but that's the action that we would be asking you to take. Okay, next. So in conclusion, we want to, on behalf of all of the staff, we want to thank the City Council for your ongoing support for the initiatives that we have brought forward. We are recommending the budget as presented, that it be balanced with the use of $510,000 of our general fund operating reserve. We are in a good position. I will tell you quite honestly, and I think a little maybe selfishly, of all of South County, we are in the best position for years of work that we have done to get here. We are in the best position to weather an economic downturn for a while. Wouldn't mean it's not hard, but we are in the best position to do that. Some of you have heard the story, 2 of you have not. The day that I walked in here and Adela brought me to City Hall, the first thing a finance guy does, well, first thing most finance guys do or should do, I said, give me the financials. I want to see where we're at. Our general fund balance. Any guesses on what it was? It was $76,000. We didn't have enough money to make payroll. I marched into Adela's office and said, you did not tell me this when you asked me to come on board. But we worked together, we worked with the council, and look where we are today. It's amazing what we have been able to do. And now we're in a very strong financial position to where we can, what I like to say, we have now laid the path to put ourselves in the way of opportunity. Rather than looking for opportunity, we are now in a position to be in the way of opportunity. we've talked about the parcel tax. We are exploring the parcel tax. That is underway. There will be some meetings very soon with the city council on some of the results and recommendations of moving forward. And whether we should or whether we shouldn't, but we know we have to do something. We're gonna need to continue to look for sources to fund capital, whether that be through grant or other things that we need to do. And the council and staff should be absolutely commended for, and this is many councils over the 12 years that I've been doing this here that have worked diligently to build and had the foresight to actually save money. You know, at the beginning of Measure Y, we used to actually have an allocation of Measure Y that took dollars and specifically moved them into the reserve, that we wouldn't spend them to build that reserve up. So it's been an effort of staff and councils to put us in the financial position that we are. So my last comment is, let's not go off the cliff. We know it's there. It's not foggy. Let's not go off the cliff. And I think with that, staff is ready for your questions.
Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you to the staff that put collectively over 200 hours together to be able to put this budget binder together. And I think, as I said before, one of the main responsibilities of the council is our fiduciary responsibility on the budget, and to make sure that we are really looking at that, not just for this year, but also for future years, in order for us to be able to anticipate some of the issues that are going to be in the forefront, and looking at strategically what are some of the mechanisms that we can use now to make sure that we don't get over the cliff by the time that comes here. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for putting that together. Thank you for all of the information in the binder. And I just hope that our residents do tune in or listen even after the fact, to be able to make sure that they're also understanding the portions of the budget and some of the limitations that we have under the measures that they have approved as part of the sales tax. And so with that, let me turn it over to the council to see if there's any questions. So we'll start with questions. And I'll start with Councilwoman Bañuelos. So we'll go this way.
First of all, I just wanted to applaud you guys. If we can give them an applaud for all the work that you guys have been doing.
Yeah, it's like, okay.
I just echo what Mayor Velazquez had mentioned. It's, you guys just put so much, and you guys do so much behind the scenes, and you guys putting stuff together, and I admire all the work that you guys do, and it's a lot. It's a lot. I understand a lot of analytical stuff, with numbers and stuff. I understand. But anyway, my question, I just, we need to move forward. We need to make change, and we need to look at our next generations and, next future council. But, I'm looking forward in, being very transparent with the community and making them understand, and, we can do some future workshops as we did before, so that way they understand where the money is going to. And then, of course, the extension of, hopefully I'm doing Measure Y, and because we need to do something. Because we're growing.
Okay.
I have one.
Okay.
Just one. And thank you so much for that. And I think thank you all for your contributions and your work. I think you say something that I said a couple of times already, is that we have to work not only in the present but also in the future. Seeing that how our city is growing, projecting the changes that we wanna do, because we don't want Soledad with double the size and only 2 exits as well. And I always complain that is something that our previous long time ago, our council should have see. But we have the opportunity to see, and that is my questions, when can we start, how soon can we start in planning for Measure Y? And is Measure S maturing as well? And when?
So Measure S does not have a sunset. So that's a good thing, that
Mhm.
it was passed without a sunset. How soon can you start planning for Measure Y? You can start planning tomorrow. You can start planning whenever. But as was previously mentioned, we are going to be coming, hopefully, with some good news that we're doing some research right now on what the residents' appetite is for a revenue source to support our fire department. We will want to get that passed first. We are also, I've already mentioned, we are going to do a rate study this year. How many of your PG&E bill goes up every year, right?
100%.
Our utilities are no different. So we just don't have authority to raise rates in the next fiscal year. So we have to perform this study so that we can actually inform the public and the council that says we're not charging more than what we need to operate and maintain the assets for those enterprise funds. But be prepared. They are going, the rates are going to go up just like everything else has. So we're going to have rate increases. We're going to possibly be looking at a new tax initiative. So maybe in a couple of years, we should actually start looking at that.
When it comes to that, you mentioned that the water waste plant that we have, other communities don't have it. Is there any way that we can offer services for those communities? And what will it take for us to offer those?
You know, that is a very good question. And I have been a proponent of this for many years. I've been doing this for 22 years now. I have long thought that we should have the Soledad plant, which has a lot of capacity, and we should partner with the city of Gonzales to build a pipeline here, and we would charge them essentially to treat their waste. And then King City seems to be the most logical place to put in. Well, it could be King City or Greenfield. They're both about the same size. Although the King City parcels where the existing pond is probably a better location. But if there were another plant like ours in King City, and they would then contract with Greenfield and just build a pipeline down, that would be a lot cheaper than building $320 million plants. But those are political decisions, and those are, they're not as easy as, it's easy for me to say that. It requires a lot of cooperation with farmers and getting easements to go underneath their farmland and all of those types of things. And so it's not as simple as just running it down the side of the road. We would actually have to get the easements. But in our case, Gonzales would only have to go as far as the prison because we have the pipeline all the way out to the prison. So very good question. There should be some regionalization. 4 small cities shouldn't have to pay for such large plants that have the capacity like we have. Like our plant has the capacity to take on Miramonte. There is no other city in South County that can take on a development like Miramonte and not increase the capacity of their plant.
Yeah, so,
That's good.
yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah, and then let me just follow up on the question from Mayor Pro Tem, because I know that there's several years ago, to your point, Mike, we did direct, and I was still I was a councilwoman, and we did direct the city manager at that time to enter into discussions with the South County cities about the appetite to go into an MOU to be able to do that, right? Because we knew that the obviously, if you have more residents paying into it, then the rates are lower as well, right? Because now you have, or they're not increased as much, but you have, you have more people spread out paying for those rates. And so we did do that. So I just want to make sure the council knows that at that time, we wanted to explore that because we understood that that's a possibility. And from my recollection, and you probably have more, but from my recollection was that there wasn't. I mean, the cities didn't want to really engage in that, and the cities wanted to move forward. I know now the reality is different because Gonzales is looking at an annexation, right? Greenfield's expanding as well, but And so is King City, and maybe it's another opportunity that we may have to be able to enter into those discussions again, but I just want to, for the council's history, that was a conversation that was had, that we did direct our city manager to enter into those conversations, and there was not, I mean, the results were not very favorable at the time with the South County cities, but it's a good opportunity now, right, to be able to re-engage.
And the single, the single largest obstacles is the easements, you know, coming across multiple farmers. It only takes one to say no. And we know that. We tried to do Pinnacles Parkway and had, you know, basically one or two people say, no, we don't want to come to the party.
Yeah.
And for full disclosure, I have been having those conversations, and we even gave, one of the jurisdictions a tour of our plant, wastewater treatment plant to consider. It probably is something that it may not be at so much at the city manager level, but it might be more of a political thing. And so if you have an opportunity or have a friend over there in a different jurisdiction and you want to share the thought, I think there's been some, you know, reluctance to not have complete
Mhm.
control over their own infrastructure, which, you know, I can
Yep.
understand as well.
Yeah, I think at that time, we also looked at some shared responsibilities, right, Mike? I think you were here still. I mean, you're already
Yeah.
here looking at also like police and fire, and I know the jurisdictions were a little bit more hesitant about sharing those responsibilities, and especially with police, it was who's gonna respond, what time, and all of that. So I think it's a good discussion, especially now that we're entering into the budget discussions, to be able to look at that a more concrete kind of way, a pathway of how we get there. If we get there, what are some strategic efforts?
Regionalization for some services has proven to work. It works in urban areas. It can work in a rural area as well. But it really does boil down to a political decision.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'll move on to Councilman Gonzalo Sanchez.
Yeah, so kind of coming back to the parcel tax. If that is passed, is that just gonna pay for that gap in funding that we have now to go to the staffing, or is it paying for like all of it? The whole contract?
So it is not the full contract because the parcel tax wouldn't,
Mhm.
it wouldn't, there's no way the residents would pass a parcel tax to pay for the
Mhm.
entire department. You know, without getting into a whole lot of details on it, because our survey is actually still out.
Mhm.
And so we don't want to taint the survey, but the intent of, and again, this is going to depend on what we get from our polling company. If we find that there's no appetite at all, we may be coming back and saying, we recommend not moving forward and we've got to look for something else. That's a distinct possibility. If we find that the residents have an appetite for it, then those funds will be earmarked for fire services only. So it will be to support the fire department. The model that we have used, it's the same model that I presented to the city council about 1.5 years ago, is the Greenfield model. Greenfield has a parcel tax for fire services, and we basically patterned what we're looking at after that model. So stay tuned. At the end of this month, we actually just met with our consultant this afternoon. We expect to have our polling results at the end of the month. So probably in August, we'll be coming after we've had a chance to look at it internally with staff. I'll stick my neck out a little bit. Megan's going to say when, but probably August, we would start coming back with some recommendations, because at that point we need to make a decision one way to go.
Thank you. And then for positions that remain open and aren't filled and they're still vacant, what happens to like that money that was allotted? Does it go into something else? Is it used for something else? Is it carried over?
So it can go, like, let's say in the current fiscal year, we have openings.
Mhm.
I'm going to use the police department for an example.
He said it.
Usually for the police department, we won't actually have any savings because the money that we would have spent for the positions
Overtime.
is going towards overtime because they're, and that's a very real thing. And it, you know, it's something we have to, and I know Fran works very hard with the police department to get those positions filled because we wear out our police force. You know, you can only do so much overtime for so long. And then they become prone to injuries and workers' comp injuries, and that costs us even more. And you can get into a vicious cycle. So we work really hard to fill those positions. Other departments, sometimes some of the same thing, or our IT manager or director is vacant, but we brought in a consultant to fill that gap. So those funds then pay for that consultant while we have that gap. So usually those funds get repurposed because we still need a body to take care of the work.
And then going back to like the wastewater and the debts and all that, is it possible, maybe this is more for you, like to apply for grants to pay those debts, or does that not really work?
There's not, to my knowledge, a grant that you could use to pay for an existing debt. There is opportunities if we were doing something new. There might be, you know, I talked to the water board. They want us to connect with the Jimenez camp, but they offered low or no interest loan. So there might be something like that. But yeah, to my knowledge, that I've never come across a grant that would pay past debt service.
I know for things that we may need either now or in the future, I know that they typically try to work with rural communities based on meeting with them and then having a friend that works there. So hopefully that's something we can look into in the future. And then I had a couple more questions. Going back to the 132,715 from the sale of the parcel being allotted to the
successor housing fund.
Yes. I'm curious about that because I was wondering if that could maybe go elsewhere to like maybe the first time home buyer program, since we lost those 23 moderate income units, maybe helping those folks that would have qualified for that. I don't know if they would necessarily qualify for low income housing, but they might qualify for a first time home buyer program.
Generally, you would not see an infusion into a program income account. Program income is the loan, the existing loans that are out there. So it's the repayment of the principal of those loans plus the interest, and then those get recycled. I would have to, Megan, you may know more than I do, but or Beatrice, I'm not aware of transferring general fund dollars into a program income account.
I think we don't necessarily, I don't know if we necessarily have to put it in the accessor housing fund, but we could set it up for just the housing trust, which then, you know, would be internal to the city or housing fund, or however Mike would have to figure out what it would be, because there are some restrictions if it flows back into the housing successor funding. There are some restrictions on how to use that fund. So we could earmark it for that purpose, but establish a different fund. If that's,
Yeah.
I'm assuming that would
Yeah,
be.
we can do that.
And then in which case it could be used for any housing related project that you wanted, whether it was down payment assistance or could be towards I think at the last meeting, you know, that referencing the MBEP letter that, you know, could go to like helping Eden Housing or any other housing project that we're working on too. So it would be up to you.
Sounds good. And then looking into the capital improvement plans, I noticed just some money is going to be working on that, and I just have a couple questions about that. So when it comes to like what's earmarked for street maintenance, What are, what exactly would we be doing for that? Like, is there a project in mind for that?
Is it for a particular fund?
It says street
Which page,
maintenance
at the bottom,
under-
yeah, which page number are you looking at? At the bottom, it'll say,
Page 2 out of 4, it says.
oh, in the summary, okay. Right. So,
Is like the answer over here, like in these?
yeah, so if we,
Yeah, and I
Okay.
don't know if you see here, but yeah, if you go to TO5,
yeah, which is page 49, there's a description of what that maintenance is.
I mean, I appreciate everybody's work, but we got this last night and I worked all day today, so I didn't really have time with the IBU.
No, and it was not our intent that you would have actually looked at that binder. That's what the
Okay.
purpose of this meeting is
Okay.
to give you an overview of it. And now you have a week to digest it before we go to the council meeting. But
Okay.
this is where we can ask those questions as you're reviewing during the week. And I will throw out, if you end up with questions between now and the next council member or council meeting, please feel free to contact Megan or myself, and we will go through those questions with you.
Well, then that answers my other 2 questions because I can just look in here.
Okay,
Thank
yeah,
you.
so there's an individual sheet that actually has a description of what's on the summary.
but if you wanted to, we have public works staff here could, explain any project that you,
Mhm.
because I know it's a short little description. If you wanted some clarification on the street maintenance, I think we're allocating 70,000. Alex and Hilda were instrumental in preparing the the capital improvement plan, and they could talk on that.
Sure.
Good afternoon, council. Alex Ramos, assistant engineer with the city of Saudade. To answer your question there, the 70,000 that you see there as a kind of a placeholder is sort of the leftover funds we have for SB1 for that fiscal year. Considering that we have slurry maintenance slated for this upcoming fiscal year, we're hoping that we can keep it to that budget. But in the event that we need a little bit extra to make a nice, clean final product, we have that 70,000 to pull from. And if we can do anything in the interim, whether that's another crack seal or something cost effective that wouldn't take us over our budget, we would use that 70,000 to cover that cost. We just kind of left it there as a placeholder. So it's a reminder to us that we have the budget there if we need it.
Perfect. And
Mhm.
then this one, my next one has a better explanation, so I don't need to ask.
Oh, okay.
Good answer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Of course.
I'm done.
Good evening, Mike. I just wanted to say thank you and the staff, City Hall, staff, city manager, and also our former council. We had to plan this, we're in a good place, like you explained, from $76,000 to having a savings of some $1 million there. And having that, the luxury to take that money and put it in that deficit that we had before we started. I think it's a great planning there. Thank you so much. If there's any questions, I will reach out to you or Megan. Thank you.
Okay, it's my turn. Well, I just want to start also by just saying, thank you for putting this together, but I think for me in the future, I would really like a process where I know last year we did a community workshop. And I think we had discussed that in prior councils to make sure that our community was aware also of what and you guys did an amazing job last year, Mike, you and Jesus, to be able to provide our community with a workshop, a better understanding of the budget process, because I think this is obviously a really critical meeting for our community members to really understand and for us to be able to really align ourselves with what is in the budget and then what is it that we know are the needs and priorities. And thank you for giving us what you collected last year as part of the survey. I know it probably wouldn't change as much, but I think, we're entering into just a lot of uncertainty into our financial landscape at both the state and the federal level. And I think it's really important to be able to have still that community input. So I just want to say for me, for future is I really want to make sure we have a timeline next year of when we want to go out to do a community workshop, budget workshop, like we did last year, because I thought it was really effective and you guys did an amazing job. And then coming back to the council and providing this workshop, which I think it's really important as well. But, you know, I'm in the same position. I usually have a lot of questions for you. And yeah, you know, I also have a full-time job. We got the binder yesterday and I'm really vigilant about looking through all my stuff and didn't have that luxury of time. So I just want to make sure that even when we do the workshop, because I do realize the intent that we do have more, that we have it with a little bit more time. So we really can make sure that when we come here, we do have questions, and then the meeting for approval is not as heavy, because hopefully we were able to get a lot of our questions addressed today. So I want to make sure that we have a timeline for next year. And then also,
So if I could just interject real quick on that. And it's a great point. We didn't go out and do a survey again because statistically and consultants have told us that it's actually of no value to survey but immediately the next year, because we haven't had a chance to make any impact. So what we have actually decided to do, and I apologize, maybe I should have included that in the presentation. After the budget is adopted, probably like the August timeframe, we plan to do budget education workshops for the community to educate them on how the budget works and what's in the budget.
yeah, no, and thank you. And I appreciate that. But I think for me, I would recommend that those budget workshops happen before, typically for next year, right? We can't change it now. But because I think it provides the community with a better insight when we are coming and reviewing the budget, because now they are aware, right, of what the different budget components are, the restrictions. So I think in terms of just awareness is always really critical, because we still get, you know, concerns about how we're spending money and in what location. So thank you for doing that. I just think next year, I would like to have a timeline of when all this is going to happen, so that way we also prepare as a council. And then on the CIPs, I know last time you guys did a really good job of just giving us a lot of the CIP workshop, which was separate from the budget, because there's a lot in the CIPs. And, you know, I know that there's a lot of different programs, a lot of different budget items on the CIPs. And I just want to caution, because I know we've seen a lot of, we have a lot of projects that came through our CIPs this year and a lot of road work. But I've also seen that there's been a lot of concerns in terms of the oversight of some of those projects, and wanting to make sure that we really have a plan that reflects our capacity. So we don't include a bunch of projects in our CIPs that are really not going to be realistic, because we won't be able, and we know that there's always issues that we've, you know, as a council this year, obviously we've had a lot of contract change orders. We have a lot of, you know, projects that were paused or projects that we extended further than what we thought. So I just want to make sure on the CIP projects that we really have, I really appreciated last year to be able just to have the CIP discussion to review all those projects and looking ahead of what is realistic under our CIPs.
Yeah, and if I can answer that question, on the budget slide, there's actually the list of the only capital projects that we are going to be working on. I think, agreed that we did too much in the last couple of years. I think part of it is because there was a backlog of so many projects that we hadn't been doing. So, you know, I think Public Works was trying to really get through a backlog, and it resulted in probably stretching ourselves a little bit too thin. So this year, if we go to that list, I'm not sure what page it's on, but it literally lists the CIP project there.
Right
There we go. Those are pretty much most of our capital projects that we're going to be focusing on. The roof repair project. We have the reclaimed water project, which is the purple pipe project. We've been doing overtime water meter replacements, and we actually received grant funding to match some of our investments there. We have the well rehabilitation projects that many some of these are carried over from projects that you've approved. And then also that's true of the water tank rehabilitation. And then Alex mentioned the big road maintenance project that we're going to be doing is a slurry seal. So we did the crack seal, which is, sealing the cracks in the roadway. And then the slurry seal will go on top to kind of lock in that. And that helps, reduce the chance of the pavement further deteriorating. And thanks to my husband, I know a lot about asphalt management. So, and then we have the pedestrian safety enhancements that you also have approved that are the H-SHIP projects that we're working on. And then the one big one that will probably be coming to you shortly, but has been in the CIP budget from this year is and I mentioned it before, we have some major manhole work that we have to do, replacement work. And then the last one is the West Street Complete Street project, which is funded. And then on this list, hopefully most of these will finish in this year, but it's closing out the projects that have been ongoing, like the Front Street maintenance project, the Apparatus Bay project, the Courtyard project, the vehicle storage project. But at the end of the day, these are the projects. There might be a few little small projects, but most of the tiny projects that was probably another confusion in prior years. We had a lot of small little CIPs, and a lot of those we shifted back into the actual budget, operations budget, and took some of the CIPs out. So that's most of them. And I don't know if I'm missing any other project from that list, Alex, but I think generally that's the list for this year. Oh, yeah, we recently completed the Veterans Project, which was the first phase of our reclaimed water project.
No, thank you, Megan, for that. But I'm just saying, for me, I think last year when we did a separate CIP project, to be able to review each of the projects, be able to review the funding, be able to review, the times and what's going to be needed for that. I think that's really important. When I look at the project by department that we have in our budget, even though it does priorities, I mean, it does have a bunch of projects listed that are beyond what you have on that slide. And so the total for that is 24 million. And I don't think that's what is reflected here. So I just want to make sure, because this is not what I see here, but for future, I'm just saying that the CIP format that we had last year, I think worked to be able to ensure that we had separately from the CIPs, because that is a big portion of our budget and what we do, and that we're understanding what's, as you said, what we're completing, what's going to be phased into the next year, and then what we're really looking at that is feasible for this coming year.
Yeah, and the 24 million total, I think the one thing that is probably triggering such a high number is the Purple Pipe project, which if you see, that's 14 million of that. So a lot of the projects I think are, and then the West Street Complete Street project is kind of a good chunk. Those are the two that are driving the cost here in the year.
Yeah.
But I will say that I think the timing, although I think there might have been a thought like we need to really drill down in this. I think, as we mentioned before, we took a lot of the council guidance on better management of the projects, fewer management of the projects, do the projects that we need to do. But our hope is the strategic plan will be done in August. And at that point, because the CIP is a 5-year planning plan, at that point, I think we can come back to council and really dig into the 5-year plan and update it. We're only budgeting for this year in this budget, but I think the capital improvement plan should be a 5-year look. So we have time to align it with the strategic plan goals. So
Yeah, and Megan, I just want to reaffirm that we did do that. So last year when we looked at the CIP projects, we did. I know, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to harp on this because I've advocated for the last several years that we have a CIP project and that it is based on a forecasted 5-year project because we want to make sure that we're not just looking at it from this year, but looking at the 5-year projection. So I know that's exactly what we have now. So I think, as I mentioned last year, having the workshop to really look at whether that 5-year strategic plan is feasible, right? To your point, Mike, to be able to be strategic of where we're at now and where we're going to be in the future. I think that's the goal. And I think for me, that's something that I think, and planning wise for the council, I think it's important to be able to separate those and be able to look at our CIP projects separately in terms of, are those the projects that we still want to move forward based on our goals in the next 5 years, or do we need to modify or upgrade or change that CIP project? And I'm saying this because I know before we didn't have it, Mike, before we didn't have that, and it was really difficult because at the last time was a lot of emergency projects coming forward. So I just don't want to lose the fact that we had a process and I think it worked, so that we continue with that process for next year.
yeah, and actually, I think I'm agreeing. I think we can actually do it way sooner because there's a lot of pieces of information that I think you guys are going to need to look at as we're working on the rate study, because the thing that I think will inform the CIP that are almost nearing completion is we're doing a water assessment plan, a water assessment plan, which are almost done. And that's going to list a lot of capital improvement projects. That's kind of the pre-work for the rate study. And so I think we're planning on having a session with council to get into that, the detail of what those capital projects would be in the future. And then I think that paired with the strategic plan we'll have the planning tools we need to kind of update the CIP. So I think maybe in the fall, I would suggest that we come together and really drill into the CIP. But it was a little hard because we are still lacking some of those key kind of planning documents that would help with prioritizing some of the CIP. So this budget really is kind of a status quo project, and that is true of the CIP projects, but we have that opportunity now that we have all this studies to do exactly what you're doing. If we did it now, we'd be flying a little bit blind without those analysis, but we're right there. We're going to be in a position to share all of that very soon.
Okay. Yeah, well, that sounds good. So we can come back in the fall to really make sure that we have that assessment done with that, and to make any modifications that need to be made at that time.
Well, I might have one caveat to that. Is a big component of the capital plan for this year is going to be the rate study, because the rate study has the 5-year projection. In fact, we measure what's in our, all those studies that we talked about that we use to prepare the budget. The rate study already has all of the capital projects forecasted for 5 years. So we've had a lot of the components for this 5-year CIP. We've never had it just in a document. You're correct, Mayor. So once that is done, we'll have that new piece to drop into it. So I would suggest that we need to get that done, and we'll get that done as soon as possible so that we know what our impending rates are going to be. Move that into a CIP plan, and then those other studies. The only caution that I would have is just because we have a workshop early, which I don't disagree. And, on the way staff has looked at it, the reason that we had that workshop last year was it was the first time we had the document. So we wanted to have a special session with the council to basically say, here's the document that we prepared. Is this what you were looking for before we dropped it into the budget? So if we do one early, like, or Alex and Juan and Hilda worked on a capital budget, and then we prepared the budget and we drop in the capital plan and we find out whether we can afford it or not. And we end up taking projects out because there may not be the funding. And so just because we go through one early doesn't mean that all of those projects will actually get funded until we actually prepare the budget.
Yeah, and I probably should have caveated that at the end of the day, I think we can do preparation, look at the studies and come up with this, what we think the CIP should be. But as Mike said, you know, it'll be contingent on the rate study. And so at the time of the budget, we can have our CIP look ahead, but there might be some, as you're saying, to adjustments after.
Well, and when we do this, the rate study, because obviously, as you said, it has some of what is included in terms of the 5-year projection for the CIPs, and why wouldn't we be also able to do some awareness in terms of the budget?
We will have to,
components,
yeah,
right? Because then, I mean, obviously it won't be at this time, but it will include that. I think it's important to be able to include that, and just giving the community an opportunity to really understand.
We will have the
Budget
operating
portion.
budgets, but just keep in mind, that's one part of this entire city budget. So for example, we will have the budgets for the enterprise funds for water, at least water and sewer. But that doesn't mean that we'll have the financial forecasts for sales tax and property tax, because we usually don't get those until the spring of every year.
Yeah, thank you for that. So let me move on to, on the sunset of the Measure Y, that's only 7 years from now. And I know we've been talking about it every time you give us this budget workshop. And I've been sitting here longer than anybody else, so I hear it over and over. And I think before it wasn't as close as 7 years. Now 7 years is just around the corner. So I would, and I know that there's a lot coming before us in terms of, you know, also working on the parcel tax with the fire department, but I think it's important to be able to establish at least an ad hoc committee now to be able to look at how do we flush out the timelines of when things need to happen, so we don't get to 3rd year or 2nd year and then we're scrambling with what do we do. I think it's important for us to have a timeline now, Mike, to be able to say, this is when we really need to start preparing for, you know, these different things. And I think for me, the other thing is, we need to be sharing a lot more of how we're utilizing that Measure Y dollars, because I think it gets wrapped up into just our budget and our general fund budget, where a lot of our community members don't know all the services coming through, you know, recreation, which are those that are funded through Measure Y, what is funded through Measure S, with some of the police department, also some of those personnel positions is like, this position is funded through Measure Y. I know we had been asking, and I know we have a newsletter now, so thank you for that. But I also want to make sure, I know councils before had asked about, you know, how do we just do like you know, also the newsletter, putting in that information about, hey, here's how Measure Y is being used, here's how Measure S is being used. So the community already knows how those dollars are being utilized. And when we go back out, it'll be easier, because then they'll already have an information instead of waiting to do it closer to when we're gonna do the extension request. One example is, I know I saw one of the cities that we work with, City of Los Banos has a recreation, and I know Jessica has a great recreation binder, but I mean,
Year in review.
no, it's the
Annual
pamphlet.
report.
Yeah, and the report, right, to be able to include, this is everything, you know, that comes in through Measure S or Measure Y, and here's how those funds were utilized for recreation, for all these other things. So our community begins to understand the importance, to your point, of those funding sources. If they go away, then we're in serious trouble, especially with those positions.
Yeah, and I think a couple of things just to mention. We have 3 now applicants for not transient, why am I saying?
Transaction.
Transaction use tax. So we are bringing those appointments back in July. So I think that committee is a good starting point. We would probably have to just talk to Mike Rodriguez about an ad hoc, just because we have to be a little bit careful about ballot measures and at what point, what a group could do in terms of education before anything got moved forward. But I think you're right. We definitely need to do that. We have done some things on the website, but we could probably do more. We didn't actually really have web presence for Measure Y or Measure S, but I know Jesus Yanez put some of the information up after we did the budget workshops, and we can look at if you have thoughts about how to weave in stories and do some education piece. I do want to say probably right now our education focus really needs to be on the fire piece. I think Councilmember Ansaldo Sanchez made a good point. We don't want to do too much simultaneously. I think we would probably want to, hopefully in June of 2026, that we can get it on the ballot and community will support that. But I think as soon as that happens, I think we would have to kind of roll hard into Measure Y. And we could even think about that in next year's budget if there's something we want to allocate to, kind of like what you did for the educational piece and that some of the stuff that we're doing early on, the potential of a parcel tax, whether or not this is a good idea to put on the ballot. We can kind of start doing some of that temperature testing.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. I'll go back to the ad hoc committee because I think, we can talk to Mike about that. But I think for council, I don't think it's going to be based on, us pushing for an extension and having that work that obviously we can't do as council members here. But I think because we already have the measure, that I think really focus on awareness, education, and how do we maximize outreach in terms of the utilization of those dollars and how it impacts our community. I'll get direction from Mike, but I don't think that should be an issue. And obviously it's not going to compete with the parcel tax, because that's something we can start looking at now to be able to also have timelines of the ramping up of the outreach efforts and what does that look like. So I don't want to discuss it now, Megan, but I think that's something for me. I want to make sure that I do touch on and that we do consider, because I know I've been asking for more outreach in terms of this. And if we're going to move forward in the next 7 years to expand this, we got to start now. And the awareness is really critical on being able to make sure that we're doing it in a way that's productive and efficient and doesn't take up a lot of staff time either. So going on the oversight committee, I know we don't have it now, but I do want to comment on that because I think I know that I want our residents to understand that we don't have it because we modified it and we've had issues with applicants, but this is where we need them, because part of what all of us that approve the measures, both S and Y, there was that oversight. And I think more than ever now, people need to understand that government does work for them and that the money that we do get is not spent ill, but we are really providing those services. So having the oversight committee give us a recommendation, and even though it's not, obviously with one of the measures, we don't have a lot of money, but I think it's important for our residents to see that, right? Those that are on the oversight committee, like, hey, wow, we only have this much of discretionary money, and being able to bring a recommendation forth. Not that the council has always, approved the recommendations, but I think that's really essential. So I want to make sure, how can we as a council support these efforts? Because I know you guys asked for our support as well to bring people on board that are really going to be at the meetings and are going to commit, right? Because it is a commitment. So I just want to make sure the council, we as a council really note that because that is important. That is a commitment that we made to the community that we are gonna have oversight and input on these dollars. And then my other comment on the general fund portion of the budget, I know you referred to the, projected balance at the end of 25-26 is 7.3 million, on the general fund.
That would be on the capital reserve fund.
Yes. And so Mike, I have a question on that because I know that we've separated funds to be able to account and for capital projects. And I know, as you mentioned, the fire, city hall and the police department, roof repairs, but we also have to be able to look at, we have the same facilities and we have done no improvements or expansions to the facilities, yet our staff is growing. So is there a way that we can also do like a transfer of maintenance funds or establish like a maintenance fund set aside? So we're putting in a percentage of any revenues. I know it goes into our revenue portion of where we exceeded some of those reserves amount, but can we start flushing that separately where we could say from the reserve amounts, a percentage goes to our maintenance for our facilities, a percentage goes to our replacement for our vehicles. So we already are accounting for that as part of.
Well, that's actually kind of built into the operating budget right now. The intent of the original intent of the capital reserve fund was when we actually started that fund when we sold our cell tower leases. We got that large chunk of money. We said, rather than just spending it on other things or increasing salaries or, or adding positions, we're going to put it aside. Because at the time, you were on the council then, there were lots of state and federal dollars for infrastructure. But that all, the opportunity was, the timing wasn't right for us to be doing something like that. Plus we didn't have enough reserves built up to make a significant difference. Had we received some grant money, the matching would have had to come through bonds or we would have had to take on debt. So the decision back several years was to establish this fund. When we have some excess sale of property, something large that happens, we were pushing money over there to save it. So let's say in 2 years, 5 years, we have CDBG grants that are available, but they require matching funds. Soledad can be first in line because we already have our matching funds available to us. But can we use those funds for something else? Yes. I mean, we can, they're general fund dollars.
And I did want to add that this year we're planning on doing a facility assessment of all of our facilities.
Right.
Because the one thing I will tell you, I hadn't been into the task force building until which is shame on me, but until a month ago, and I was pretty horrified at what our police folks are doing in that or have in that task force building. It's going to be a major cost, to get it to where I think it should be. And so these are the things, and that's just one facility. We also have we're working on a significant grant application for all of our emergency generators across the city. But it would require us to, we could tap into several $1 million of grants, but it would require, I think, like a $700,000 match. So that's where I think Mike is suggesting, that was the intention of council. And I think that's the right intention because we don't want to piddle it away on little things. We want to make sure that we can, we have all of these mounting facility needs and we want to be able to have the ability to have that money so that we could address those opportunities. But also if we have something, a terrible failure and it takes $1 million, we want to be able to tap into that too.
Mayor Pro Tem.
To the chair, I have a question. If we let's say we don't do it, but if we do that, if we allocate money for different parts, will that cost us not to be able to use it? Like for instance, if we allocate money for repairs, if we need it in another place, are we able to get it back and put it into the reserve? So how is that? Because I think it's complicated, no? And that's why it is in one reserve, so that it can be utilized in the different parts that is needed.
So the only way that it would be replenished is when we have a year of excess. So if let's say we finished our budget and we projected it to be, in this budget, let's say we're projecting to use $510,000 of our operating reserve, right? Well, let's say that throughout the year, something happens and geez, the economy turns around and gas prices go down to $3 a gallon and everybody starts driving and our sales tax revenue actually goes crazy. We won't use that and we might have a surplus. And in past years, council has directed, I know that it was 2 or 3 years ago, council directed for us to move $250,000 of a year where we had a surplus into the capital reserve. Okay, you know, that doesn't mean that can't come out. We have used those funds. We used the funds most recently to purchase, it just left me.
Oh, the condo?
Yes, the condo. I was like,
Hmm.
yeah, we used the interest earnings. So we didn't use the principal of the money that was in the fund, but that fund is earning interest. And while the interest rates are high, so we bought the city condo from the interest earnings of that capital fund.
And
So-
sorry, one heavy recommendation I would have is we should probably do the facility assessment study because it will drive home what are the most urgent needs for repairs. And that could be a future guide to council to look at allocating funding.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I saw another jurisdiction because I got information from them in terms of their operating expense and their maintenance and their facility assessment. So they do set aside. So I know it's workable because it's another jurisdiction that's not different than a general law city like us. That does set aside in the different pockets to be able to ensure that there is money that is being set aside for the maintenance and for the the vehicle replacement. I know at one point we had a bunch of vehicles from the police department need to be replaced, right, or other vehicles, and that we are setting that aside. So we're not worrying about, we don't have money at the end of the year because we used it for this purpose or that, but that there is set aside for these specific items that we know in the long run need to be replaced, right?
Mhm.
And so that there is that. So I'll look into that, Mike. I'll share it with you, whether that's something that's feasible that could be done here or not.
And some of those line items are budgeted in each section, and we could go through, like, we have a specific fleet area where those are budgeted. So we could maybe show you where some of those facility expenses and so forth are budgeted. It's not that we're not doing anything. We've just largely budgeted them in the operating
Right.
budget.
And
And
And one of the things you said, Mayor, is, the word assessment. So like, for example, our assessment districts, they run that way. Part of that assessment is for future repairs and those types of things. In the just general government and the revenues that come out, we don't have an assessment that says of this revenue source, this much is going to be moved
yeah,
over.
you have to
Yeah.
calculate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was what I learned. There's a calculation that's based on some prior stuff, but you could do it. So I'll just share with you guys to see, in terms of savings for these specific things that we know are gonna happen, how we could do that. So on this, just moving forward then in terms of the, that was for the reserves for maintenance and vehicle replacement. I'm glad we're doing the facility assessment. I also, Megan, want to make sure too, as we're looking at departments, because I know the last couple of years we have increased our personnel and we do need it. Yeah, obviously we needed it. I also know on the permit and development, as you had noted in the report, that we want to make sure these projects are moving forward expeditiously and ensuring that we have the capacity and the staff to be able to do that. So as the projects are coming in, especially the big commercial projects, that there is no stalling, right? That we're trying to move these. Obviously they have to respond as well, but that we do have capacity to be able to do that. And so before there was a study that was done, and it was before my time, but it was I think it assessed all the departments in capacity and it gave recommendations of what was needed. So I would like to see if we do the facility assessment, is there an opportunity to do a similar study again to really make sure that we have the capacity that we need and we're projecting any future capacity for different departments that we're gonna need based on development, based on housing, based on all of that.
So it's probably in various different, pieces. What do I want to say? Like, when we do the rate study, part of that is operating what we need to operate the facility. So some of that assessment is going to be done. I think we have some projections when it comes to like Miramonte, or when we are looking at our development impact fees. And so there's some correlation to what that means in terms of expanding services as it relates to police and fire. But yeah, I mean, we could take a look at that. I know that it may just depend on what department. Some of it is, I think all departments are understaffed. It's just a lot of what we can afford. But as it relates to revenue streams, we can kind of look at some of the capacity, and yeah, I suppose we could look at a staff assessment. Particularly, I think, as we look at our community development, I think there's an opportunity to look at what kind of we need and how we can better collect fees to offset the cost of personnel. I know, and I think Beatrice said something.
We already hear because of educational development technicians for community development. So during
Do you mind, just so it's being recorded?
Sorry, Beatrice Trujillo, Community and Economic Development Director. So I just wanted to clarify, for the upcoming fiscal year, we're planning to reclassify a position to now have 2 development technicians. We have currently a building technician, but we have seen an increase in the need for that service. So we're planning to have 2 full-time development technicians. And with that, we also truly want to assess our permits. We see that our permitting fees are below the other jurisdictions close to us. So we would really want to assess that, and depending on the revenue that we generate next year, also assessing the need for personnel cost, but we will have 2 technicians for next year.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think the report that I reviewed was probably done like in 2000, because it was way before I came on board, and it did have a series of recommendations for the departments. And I know it's obviously out of date, but as we're growing and as things are moving and as we're seeing more projects that, I mean, I think just the increased capacity is really important to be able to look at for the future.
Yeah, and it's been a recurring conversation also, what level of the staffing needs we have and where can we transition from consulting to just building internal capacity and growing our team. That's definitely a conversation that we have been having.
And I think that's probably the big focus in 25, 26, because we don't, as we mentioned before, we really are kind of at a bare bones budget. And so that means, how can we not only understand our capacity, but are we able to build our capacity internally and cut some of the consultant contracts, because some of them are quite costly and we're paying people $250 an hour versus, staff might be fully burdened, might be $100, dollars an hour at the most, so we are making those evaluations internally, and it might be department by department, but we can talk a little bit more about the assessment. The first one that is going to be assessed is through the rate study with water and wastewater staff. And then as you know, we have been evaluating our staffing for fire personnel, and that's part of why we need to do the parcel tax, because we're not meeting national standards at a 2.0 staffing on our engines. Many cities are actually at a 4.0 staffing, so 3.0 is where we need to be at.
Yeah. And many cities have closed down their different fire departments, satellite stations because of the increased
Staffing,
costs,
yeah.
right, and staffing. So
Mhm.
I'm glad we're not there. So.
No, no.
I'm glad we're not there, but yeah, and I think we've seen a lot of, I mean, what you guys showed us, there's a lot of increase in revenue, increase in expenditures and, you know, not a lot of revenues coming in, and obviously we have to look at that. My last just comment or question on this is, I know that we've talked about, at least you and I have had conversations, and it's on here as well with the Monterey County Dispatch Services and some of the increased cost in that, and obviously we know we have the SPCA contract as well, and those increased costs. So I think those are some of the other elements, Megan, that I think the council needs to be aware of. And to your point, before we go down that fiscal cliff, is what do we need to start doing now to look at some of these expenditures that are really driving up the cost, and where the revenue is staying flat and we don't have funding for that. So you know, I really want to make sure that we address some of those and looking at ways that we can support with doing that, and what are some of the alternatives.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to start a conversation with some of our compatriots in other cities about the 911 costs and how we can wrangle those, because they just keep going up and up, and the service is not really getting better. I think there's also shifts at the sheriff's office that is going to put more responsibility, administrative responsibility on the police department. So something we have to evaluate with the new chief of police is administrative functions that are gonna land back on the police department. So that's something, that's another thing to think about. And then, yeah, the SPCA costs have forced us to actually stop handling cats. So we're looking at alternatives. Maybe we've had 6 spay and neuter clinics, but we're looking at it, you know, looking at maybe smaller partnerships with nonprofits to do a community cat program. And we also have to address workers' comp. Our workers' comp claims keep going up, and so we need to do a better job of providing training, safety training, and working with staff to be safer. But I think Mike mentioned the overtime for police is really, you know, putting wear and tear. I mean, not to talk about our officers like their vehicles, but it's really, you know, affecting their health. So we really need to fill the vacancies, because that is really a factor. It's not really a savings at the end of the day, because it's resulting in other costs.
Yeah. No, thank you, Megan. And I think with that, with the police vacancies, I know we had talked about strategically. I mean, we have different incentives. Obviously, you know, we can't pay enough here, right? Because the officers are gonna find their way to other localities. But I think maybe having a conversation again about what else can we do for retention purposes. We have done already, you know, some changes in terms of some of the retention benefits to make sure that, you know, they come here, they stay here, at least we have that 5-year, you know, incentive. And you know, maybe an evaluation, is that working? Maybe it's not, because we still have a lot of vacancies, and what else can we do? And maybe that's, you know, a conversation when the new chief comes
Yeah.
on board to be able to discuss that. But I think that's important. And then, yeah, the SPCA, our officers don't need to be transporting animals, and, you know, instead of it being they're here for public safety calls, they're traveling to the SPCA, and that just doesn't that's just not logical. So we have to figure out how we
Yeah.
can work on what can we do with those increased costs.
Mhm. Yeah, so those are things that are definitely part of the strategic plan moving forward.
Okay, well, those are all my comments. Obviously, we can reach out to you directly if we need anything else, but you know, I forgot to take this out to the public. Or did I take it out to the public?
No, not
I
yet.
didn't, yeah, so let me, before we move on, council, let me take it out to the public to see if there's any comments or questions on the presentation, from those that are joining us out in Zoom. We don't have any public here in the council chamber, so I will just take it out to those that are joining us via Zoom if there's any public comments on the presentation. Okay, seeing none, then, with that, then council, we will move on, then no final comments or thoughts, you can reach out to Mike or to Megan. Okay, so before, let me get one.
And by the way, we know it's a lot of information, so if you need a little bit of educational time, between now and budget, just let me know, and definitely, I know we have our briefings, but maybe that's not enough time, or we can extend it if you want to, get into the nitty gritty of the budget. Happy to do that.
Okay, so with that then, council, before we close out, I know we added another agenda to the item, and which is council comments, so.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say before any comment is given that keep in mind that the public may not have anticipated that there was going to be council comments at the end of this particular session, and as such, comments that you think are going to be particularly relevant to the members of the public might be better said or stated at a future meeting. I know that we do have a status update that is planned for the immigration subcommittee set for next Wednesday's meeting as an agendized item. And so sometimes making those types of comments are going to be more meaningful when you have members of the public there, either anticipating the comments and wanting to weigh in or respond and so forth. That being said, you should go ahead and feel free to make comments on any item. My understanding is there was a desire to at least make a statement about the immigration issue and recent events in the city, and that's fine. Let's keep them within the context of the comments that we usually make during the end of the meetings, during the council acknowledgements and reports and/or future items. So, try to limit your time to the usual 3 minutes that we would spend on those sorts of things.
Okay, thank you for your guidance, Mike. Yeah, and I don't think, yeah, so I just, for me, and I'll start and then I'll open it up. If council has comments, council may not have comments, and I just want to make sure that I publicly take a stand and want to make sure that we stand in solidarity with our community members and elected officials in Southern California impacted by the recent ICE raids that started last Friday, where we saw the operations that were not focused on really targeting criminals, but on working immigrants as they went into Home Depots, as we know, and the Garment District in LA and some of the other locations. So for me, as a daughter of Mexican immigrants, I find these raids that are snatching people away without due process is really horrible and unconstitutional. And we should all be outraged as elected officials. We each took a note to defend the Constitution of the United States and the state of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to protect our residents. So I just want to reiterate to our community that our local law enforcement, has not, is here to protect our community for the public safety, and that as general law cities, we don't enforce federal immigration law. That's not within the purview of our cities. And I want to make sure that our residents know that and understand that. And for at least I'll speak on my behalf that I do believe in our Constitution. I do believe in due process, and I do believe in the protection of people's rights, whether they're documented or undocumented. That's not to say that we obviously support families that want to ensure that they remain here and that they have obviously a process for comprehensive immigration reform, which is out of our purview. But I also want to make sure that we continue to do our jobs as locally elected officials to build the trust to protect our families who are not committing crimes. Obviously, those that are committing crimes, there is repercussions for them, and I'm not defending that. But I do want to say that for our immigrant population, especially Soledad is 80%, where we have a lot of mixed status families. I think it's important for us as elected officials to reiterate to our community that we are here to support our families, and we are not here to enforce immigration laws. That's not the purview of cities. And that we do have a lot of the immigration resources that are available on our website in case any of our families need it. I know that our team worked really hard to be able to put that on our website and a lot of the resources that our residents need at this time. And I just want to acknowledge that there is fear, there is anxiety. And it's not obviously just in LA, but what happened in LA does send a chilling effect to all of our communities, especially our Latino communities. So thank you. Those are my comments. Okay, I'll open it up for any of the council members that wish to make any comments before we conclude.
I'd like to make one comment and acknowledgement.
I just wanted to say thank you to Lombardi for sharing that email. And I appreciate, just being proactive, not just here, but to all the residents to being understanding that, we are in support and they're in support of our community. So I wanted to acknowledge Lombardi and everyone else that is and been proactive in the situation that's going on. And my comments is, yes, I am going to echo what Mayor Ana Velasquez had mentioned, because, we have to, remain and stay in solidarity with, not just with our communities, but everyone. So thank you.
I want to make a brief comment about the post that you did. Wonderful. And I think that I was looking at the comments, and I saw that one person said, because it was mentioned that we're not applying the federal law, and the person said that you're not applying the law. No, it's that that is not their job to go and do the federal. That's why it's called a federal law, not the local law enforcement. And I wanna thank all of our police department for all the work that they do. And I also want to echo the support for all the communities and everything. And I might be creating something here, but I want to say this because I am an immigrant. I came to this country when I was 18. And I do understand how people feel when there's all these problems. And from the bottom of my heart, I'm going to say that when you are walking around demonstrating, that shows the support that you have for that community. But when you are carrying the flag of Mexico and attacking police officers, that is not what I will support. No matter what, no matter who they do it. For me, I grew up in an environment in which they taught us to love our country, to respect our country, and to respect our flag. That is very important, because if you go to Mexico and raise the American flag, you will be dealt with. People will tell you that you cannot raise other countries' flag in there if our flag is not there. And I will ask everybody to do the same, because I'm saying I because I still do that. I still hold that truth to the court. You cannot use the flag of another country and hit on somebody, especially federal law enforcement or local law enforcement or people. That is not the way that we were taught to defend our rights, at least in this country, and in Mexico as well. That is not the way to defend our rights. That is not your right to do. And I'm going to tell you something else. When you do that, you are causing stress to the families of those who are in danger, actually. I think I made a comment to Megan the other day that I was really quiet the whole week, and I couldn't figure out why. And it's because I still have that fear. I still have that fear. My cousin
was captured right here in the front of the plaza, and immigration services took him to the house and forced him literally by the neck so that he can show his permit. So I lived that. I lived that fear. Nobody told me, nobody shared with me. I feel that. So when we demonstrate, we have to be really careful in how we do it, because the children are watching the news. The children are watching the websites, and they're seeing how much impact, and they go to school in fear. And until you understand the fear and the anxiety of living with that sadness, then you will see who's impacting our community with positive way. So thank you for all of you guys who always try to do that for our community.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I'll turn it over to council, or yeah, whoever wants to make a comment. Obviously, you don't need to.
I'll go next, and this isn't meant to cause any dialogue. I understand where your sentiments are coming from, Mayor Pro Tem, but we are the United States of America, and we do have First Amendment rights. And so that's part of it. And sometimes people are gonna wave flags that we don't want them to be waved. And I think it just depends on the person and what they stand for. And I think we have to be a little cognizant also about how we speak about protests, because protests are how things kind of happen and things get done. The civil rights protests gave a lot of people rights. The gay liberation protests also, and the riots are why we have the rights that we have today. I think we have to be a little bit cognizant about that as well. I do also agree with the mayor, and it's just very disheartening to hear what's going on. I feel like right now ICE is being weaponized to terrorize our immigrant communities, to raid homes, businesses, and public spaces across the state of California. And they're not criminal sweeps, they're mass unlawful detentions of human beings, sometimes even of citizens as well, of the United States. Power is being abused by ordering the National Guard and putting our service members in dangerous situations that they shouldn't have to be in because of just like a political agenda. And I don't think that's fair. It's an abuse of federal power that's meant to intimidate rather than to protect. And I personally, as a human being, speaking on behalf of myself, condemn these actions and the administration behind them. The state of California is where I grew up. I've always lived here, and it's always stood for dignity, justice, and humanity. And as Mayor said, we had an oath, and I won't be silenced or silent to as the administration that we have rips families apart and fuels fear just for political gain.
Thank you, Councilmember Ansaldo Sanchez.
I also want to add that I do stand in solidarity with the immigrant population that's going through this. I really agree and echo what Mayor Pro Tem actually what Mayor said, and Mayor Pro Tem and also Councilmember Ansaldo. And all bits and pieces, everything kind of put together. I do agree that if we didn't have a constitution, we would be doing whatever's happening right now. But we do have a constitution, and I believe that's being trampled on right now. So I mean, I stand for the cause, and we all have rights. Like Councilmember Ansaldo said, I do stand for, like I said, in solidarity with what's going on with the people that are suffering these raids, and I do want to add that if you're breaking the law and you're illegal, of course you're going to be taken away. I agree with that, but, other than that, we're together, solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you, council. And with that, then we will